We're recording. You're listening to the Tune Up and Jam podcast. Ready? Go.
You're listening to episode number 37 with special guest Baz Francis.
Tune Up and Jam.
All right, tune up, turn up, get down and start jamming. Welcome and guten Abend, Francis.
Say it. Guten Abend?
Guten Abend.
Oh, guten Abend.
Yeah, that's good evening in German.
Right. Good
So
evening.
anyway, we are on episode 37, I believe, right?
Yep. 37.
And this episode, we were lucky enough to have Baz Francis come in. He's a singer-songwriter from UK. And Francis, how did we have that happen? How did that work out?
Oh, Baz got in touch with us, which everybody out there can do the same, and we'd be happy to feature you on an episode. And when Baz came in, I thought we had some really cool conversations, so we should get right into it.
Yeah, the music's great. Have a listen, and the conversation is great too. So here we go, Baz Francis.
Inside the coldest season, what burns inside of me? I'm always broke down. I'm always broke down now. To tell a different story, then dress it up the same. Although it pains to tell ya, some things will never change. I'm always broke down. I'm always broke down. Love comes in many shapes. Now if you wanna talk, I might not wait for you. If you wanna communicate, when you wanna talk, there might not be an answer. Till that time, don't let me go on. Preach to the empty seats when the people go away. Adventure is in color, your skies are always gray. You always rain down, you always rain down. I kick the bucket over, it always seems to be when there's a rotten apple, I fell out of the tree. You always come down, but love comes in many shapes. Now if you wanna talk, I might not wait for you. If you wanna communicate, when you wanna talk, there might not be an answer. Till that time, don't let me go on. No one said it was hard, but this spoon in my mouth rusted long ago. I thought I'd let you know that if you wanna talk, I might not wait for you. If you wanna communicate, when you wanna talk, there'll never be an answer. Till that time, don't let me go on. Don't let me go on. Don't let me go on. You don't let me go on. Don't let me go on.
Well, we're here with Baz Francis. He's a solo artist and lead singer of Magic 8 Ball.
That is correct.
How are you today?
Really, really good. Better for being here. I just was really happy, as I said, to be able to get this chance to come over here and do this with you this evening. And it's a nice end to actually a pretty good week for me. So I hope yours has been as good.
Well, that's very nice of you. Thanks. We're really happy to have you here. Actually, we're glad that you contacted us as well to come on over here. You've got a new record that you're promoting?
Yeah, Face That Launched 1,000 Shipwrecks. It's a year old now, but I'm still touring it, and this is the 11th country of that world tour. And whilst I was playing over in Africa last year, I recorded its accompanying live album, Trainwrecks in the Desert. I'm responsible for a lot of wreckage.
Evidently,
Mm-hmm.
two albums with this with wreckage.
I
So-
know. I was thinking of going for car crashes, but then I thought, nah. Just it might seem like I'm tempting fate at that point.
So, you, upon listening to your material, both solo and with Magic 8 Ball, you are the primary songwriter.
That is correct.
I find your writing very melodic and very soothing to the ear
Oh, thank you.
with your writing. And where does that come from? Where does what do you attribute to your melodic influences, or where do the melodies come from within you?
I think one thing that I was fortunate about, we were talking before we came on air about how I'm glad that I grew up in England, but I now live in California, because it gives me a different outlook to someone who, maybe has lived here all their life. And I like having that different attribute to my character to bring to the table. And another thing that I am lucky about was that I got into music through soul rather than rock. And to this day, Marvin Gaye is as big an influence on me as anyone. And I guess I wanted to sort of infuse that sort of soulfulness and the principles of Motown songwriting over the guitar work that I did. And then along the way, I got into the various stages of rock, and with my favorite bands being, amongst others, people like Queen and Cheap Trick, it's very hard not to be melodic, having gone on a bender of listening to them for a prolonged period of time. And one thing that I've always felt is that, with some exceptions, you don't have to be amelodic in order to rock, be heavy. I think that some of the greatest metal songs of all time have a very catchy melody, and I think that if you stripped it back to an elevator music version, you can still hear the heaviness, like "Sad But True" by Metallica. I mean, imagine a Muzak version of that. I mean, you know where that's going. You know that's dark. You don't need it spelt out for you with heavy guitars. So I've always wanted to infuse that, and in the UK, about around the time that I started Magic 8 Ball, we were deeply unfashionable. Probably we still are, but there was this influx of bands that were trying to be like the Libertines, and they were playing this sort of garage indie rock. And the singers, who all looked the same, by the way, skinny jeans and all that, they would pretend that they didn't know how to sing. So the songs would be like, and they would be from nice areas of suburban London, but they'd put on what we call a Mockney accent. So it'd be like, "I think you was really good, and I would like to," yeah. And it was
It's
just
all
like,
intentional.
yeah, it was very much an affection, an affectation, sorry. And I didn't want to play to the cheap seats by being that guy. And I used Freddie Mercury as my sort of spirit guide, if you will. during that time, and I was just like, well, I don't really care if this isn't fashionable. Queen were never fashionable, and they're better than this.
Yeah.
I won't swear.
I'm always curious too, even taking it farther back. How did you get? What made you start learning music, like as a musician? Like, how did that begin?
I think when we all are growing up, because you guys are musicians too, you want to be like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. You want to, you want to be able to slide on your knees and impress girls and all that stuff. So I think we all have that in us from a young age. So I got an electric guitar when I was 14 and didn't know how to use it, but it was an electric guitar and it was, cool. But you can't learn an instrument based purely on that. You have to have a passion. And my passion came from, I turned on the radio one day. I remember it clearly, April 1996. I turned on the radio and this thing came out of the stereo, went and that song was called A Design for Life by Manic Street Preachers. And it, to this day, is one of my favorite songs ever. And if you are not familiar with it, it is possibly the greatest rock song, I could have hoped to have heard. And the additional layer is it's got an orchestra over it, but not this sort of bloated 80s power ballad orchestra. I'm talking intense Phil Spector.
Wall of sound.
It was an absolute assault, but when you hear that and it's just this really gutsy song, I was like, but it's beautiful, and why does it make me feel this way? So then I went from being the guy playing on one string, ding, 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 to getting the tab and going, how do you play this? Dun, dun, dun. Oh, that's a chord, and that's called a C. Ah, I see what they're talking about. And then staying up, and I was a spotty kid, so I had no friends or girl interest. So I'd be like, oh, the Manics are playing on late night TV and like VHS, and like pause it and go, what chord's he playing? And that's what lit the fuse.
So are you essentially self-taught on the guitar?
Yes. And when I was in school, like I said, I didn't have a social life at this time, and there was one guy that was really good at the guitar, and on lunch breaks he used to go up to the music rooms where you weren't supposed to go because dare you be creative, and he used to whittle away, do his like Van Halen licks and like be really snooty, and I used to watch him and go, how do you do that? And he'd go so I'd go home and I'd learn my own thing. And then I was in college and they made us have these lessons with this guy so that we could learn the theory, but that was about approximately 2 years later, maybe a year or two later. But by that time, the teacher said that I was probably, by the British standard, grade 5 level.
I think it's interesting because you bring up a point where just because, all of us being musicians and we encounter just different people through all walks of life, and they say, oh, how do I want to play? How do I get started? And, we give them the best advice we can. But the point that you bring up, which I think is common for a lot of musicians that really take it further, is that it starts with that passion. If you have that passion, you'll seek the different ways to learn or to incorporate that. So that's something that I think is incredibly valuable, especially to a young...
universal as well. Like,
yes.
We're from different, starting points in the world, but there are just some universal truths if you play music. And
yeah, you were saying things that echoed, my experiences where, the days before the internet. Well, at least when I started, it was
Yeah.
before the internet, and I would go to the library. I would get magazines. I would watch other players and just stare at their fingers and try to think, okay, why are they doing that? How did they do that? Mm-hmm. So this is all very, very familiar.
It was good because it wasn't. I hate backing tapes, and when I go to a show and I see someone use them, not because it's a key element of their performance, but because they don't want to do that extra work. They don't want to have. They want the safety crutch. I think we when I was learning music, you didn't have those luxuries. You just, it was warts and all, and I love that. And yeah, this reminds me of hair metal, and the reason I bring that up is there is nothing wrong with being a kick-ass band with good hair. Okay, Guns N' Roses, give them to me all day long. Aerosmith, all right, I love them. However, as you know, in the 1980s, just down the road from here, there was an influx of bands that were more interested in the style than the substance. And that will work for a little while. And then people go, we need something more, and style ain't enough to go on. And what you have with the Aerosmiths and the Guns N' Roses is a deep-rooted love for, artists that went before them. They didn't just all of a sudden one day pick up a copy of Rolling Stone and go, oh, I'm quite pretty. I reckon if I wore, my mum's makeup, I could look.
If I hold the guitar a certain way,
yeah,
I'll look the coolest.
Exactly. So I was in many respects blessed that I grew up ugly. So. Because maybe I'd be one of those guys.
But you're not. You found that you had the passion and you've learned music. Because Rich and I were talking about, we heard some songs and you were taking things like melodically and harmonically into unique directions as opposed to, like cookie cutter formulas of popular music.
Yeah, interestingly, you use what are called borrowed chords, or some people call them mixture chords, which would, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the terms, but if you use a chord from C minor in a C major song, that would be a borrowed chord, or from a different mode.
Oh yeah, so
like using like a flat 3 or
Yeah,
something like that. And you seem to have a knack for doing that in a lot of your songs. They kind of go in a different direction. I guess somebody really famous who does this a lot would be like Burt Bacharach. If you know how, like you feel like it's going in one direction and then it turns in a very, not in an odd way or a strange way, but almost like that was a very cool or soothing sound. And I've noticed that about your songs.
Oh, that's
and I don't know if you knew that is what you're doing. And which is interesting since you said you're self-taught. I just wasn't sure if you knew that, but that's very cool that you do those things.
I know the terminology, but the reason I put those awkward, jarring chords in the mix and the way in which I play them is deliberate, and it is actually inspired by Jimmy Page and the idea to do something Eastern sounding. And because the Indian music, they play to like eighths and eighth notes and quarter notes and everything. I loved how Led Zeppelin combined that, with their style of guitar music, and it just felt. Now we're just so used to hearing Kashmir and just going, well, that's just what Led Zeppelin sounds like, but
right.
Or whether it was the Beatles doing their more Indian infused moments, that was really groundbreaking, and I took and take a lot of influence from those guys because I think it's just so much more interesting than, going straight down the middle. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like a lot of, punk music that has that direct hit. But I think even if I go heavier with a record, there has to be that, the song has to be there.
Right.
You can't mask it with distortion, if it's a bad song. And so the sense of melody is important, but also the sense of the unobvious. And I think we all sort of have our own individual styles. We learn a trick, and for us it's what we do, because we taught ourselves how to do it. But other people listen to it and they go, "How do you do that?" And you go, "Oh, I didn't." You're
Yeah.
aware of it, but you didn't realize it was that exceptional to hear.
'Cause it's so natural for you
Yeah.
to do. Yeah.
And that's so it's nice that you pick up on that, because I've always been a fan of the major to minor songs, and because I have such a fetish for it, I can't. I've now gotten to a discerning point in my adulthood where I have to have it delivered with a new twist. It's just like, you can't just give me an A to A minor and expect me to be happy. I need you to, throw
How
something
did you
at
get
me.
there?
Yeah.
Or where are you going after that?
Yeah, come on, like you're better than that. And so that's what I require, and sometimes that, going back to influence, sometimes I get my fill of this from a pop song on the radio or a metal song. I think one of the best hard rock acts of recent years is My Chemical Romance. I think they are a killer hard rock band with a great sense of melody.
I could see that. I can the difference in, or how they're exploring their direction, and the textures that they're choosing too. They play into exactly what we're talking about. Just going in directions that are not so typical,
But they
and refreshing too.
Well, but again, you say My Chemical Romance to a bunch of people, and they go, "Pfft," because they're judging them on the outfits of their lesser peers. Because there were so many bands that came out in the wake of My Chemical Romance who weren't as good, and gave emo a bad name, much like people watered down grunge and punk before that. And people don't actually give them the credit they're due, in my opinion.
Most of my exposure to them has been just on the music side, less on the visual.
But
So
their visuals are
yeah.
amazing, because he's an illustrated artist. The videos are magnificent. And we were saying about the different senses
Right.
before we came on air as well. And the way in which they stimulate the eyes as well as the ears. It's, to me, what rock and roll should be about. It's about using all the different colours on the spectrum rather than just playing it safe with the primaries. So I respect anyone who tries to sort of mix the colours and actually create a world of escapism, because that's why we listen to music. We don't listen to music as, to be business minded. We listen to music because we want to be excited and moved. And I'm not moved by listening to someone sing a song that they've written to get them some crucial airplay in Whole Foods, Although with all fairness, Whole Foods in Brentwood has the best music of any store I've been into.
For the record.
Have they played any Baz Francis?
No, and that is
We
not
gotta
through
get that. We gotta
not
get
through
that
lack
out
of
there.
trying,
Right,
but
right.
but I mean it's brilliant, because they play, who have they played in there? Blind Melon, Weezer, Faith No More, Blur, Parliament,
Wow. Check, and check right there.
Zeppelin. I think I've heard them do Zeppelin back to back. Beatles, Mike Viola.
So it's got to be the staff there putting it on the players, right?
Yeah,
Something like that,
maybe so. Maybe so. I'll slip a CD of mine in
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know. So you're originally from England.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been in the States or Los Angeles?
We've been living here for 8 months, I think.
8 months. I'm curious to know about the music scene, or the differences in the music scene that in England versus Los Angeles, to what you could, what you've observed.
I think one thing you've got to bear in mind. Have you guys been to England?
Yes.
I haven't been to England. I've been about 8 other countries in Europe, though.
Oh, okay,
but
well,
not England.
Europe.
Yeah.
That same applies there. The scale of anything in America is far greater than in Europe. You just, when you say down the road in England, you mean, I'm just going to walk for 2 minutes. Here, one end is Santa Monica and the other, it's just, you need a car. And so just taking that as an example, so many people have flocked to LA because they think I'll get to Hollywood and I'll get picked up and it will be amazing. And there is a great deal of musicians here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's a great musician. And with England, I think there's less of, even with London, which is the capital, there is less of an immediate abundance in one concentrated space of the artistic community. For all the millions of artists, America's got a million more. It's just that kind of thing, but it doesn't reflect on quality necessarily. And in terms of a national community, you could fit the UK inside a little pocket of California. So if I wanted to do a gig at the top of Scotland and I lived at the bottom of England, it's just take a day out. You can't. It's a small country, so you're never that far away. There's never a valid excuse why you couldn't do a show up there or down here. And when I came out to the US for the first time, and I, saw the scale, and then when I started performing live here 10 years ago, I realized that if I wanted to do this on a more developed scale and play elsewhere in America, it was going to be a big undertaking, because just to get to the convenience store is a 5-minute drive. And that gave me a sense of drive in Europe. I was just, I guess, subconsciously, because I was just like, well, I want to do a gig in Italy. Why can't I? And why haven't these people? And a lot of people I find in England, they don't want to do a gig in Italy because that's far. Whereas here, the distance between England and Italy is here in San Francisco. It's just like, get in your car. So I'd start driving around Europe with Magic 8 Ball solo, and then getting a bit of a network together that worked for me. And then I came out to California last year to live, and then started to tour from everywhere from Red Bluff down to Tijuana. And then when I went back to England in March, I was shocked by how people were bitching and complaining about attending a show that was a 5-minute walk from their house, or I've got this gig and it's just like a load of hassle because it's like, an hour's drive. It's like, boo-hoo. Grow a pair. Come on. And I just don't have any sympathy for that type of provincial apathy. And one thing I will say about the American music scene that I've been witness to is people are we're all aware that if we don't take that gig, 10 others will.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, people, there is work, to be done. There are gigs out there to be had, and if you want to stay home and watch TV, good for you. Good for you. Someone else will take the gig. The world won't stop, and I like that. It keeps me active, and it keeps me switched on.
Yeah, there's definitely that sense of urgency in a way
Yeah.
here.
But I think maybe coming to America when I did all those years ago gave me a sense of that. And then when people in from my childhood start, like elderly family members started dying, I realized, yeah, there's always that urgency for all of us because we're all gonna punch into the afterlife at some point. So I got stuff to do before then. And one thing I'm also not afraid to say now is no. Because I don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste. And sometimes you get labeled unfairly as being the bad guy. I want to say, you know the word I'm thinking, but it ends with whole. And but it's not actually that at all. It's about commanding just the basic level of respect that every person, and indeed musician within that, should be shown on a daily basis.
Right. There's a previous episode where we've had extended conversations on why would you take a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a small list, anything from whether it just be fun, maybe great pay, great experience, perhaps helping another musician who, you're fond of, or just, it's a small list. But a very, networking. It's a simple, short list that if it doesn't check off any of those, I mean, there's no need to take a gig just to take a gig.
You've just listed my list, so you've saved me the bother.
Yeah,
Because that's the thing. We were talking about the deadliest thing you can say to a musician when discussing a gig booking: exposure. You get exposure. Well, you know what? So do sex offenders. Doesn't mean it's a good exposure, and like, oh, you're gonna let me play for free because I get to expose myself behind your door. That sounds terrible, but it's not too far from what I've done in the past.
And did you say thank you?
Did you say thank you? And I got a great one earlier. This guy wanted me to spend $1,000. I don't want to say too much, but he wanted me to spend $1,000 on a guitar, and then he was going to give me some exposure on his Instagram.
Yeah.
Thank you for the cough.
Yeah.
Again, save me the bother. And look, we've all got bills to pay. I get that, but it just came at the end of a lot of people telling me about how they can grant me this great platform, and I've been very fortunate in my life to work with some geniuses, and the truer the star, the less the diva. That's what I find. I think if you've got a genuine talent, you don't need to be that guy. And if someone, and I think it's a bit like a relationship. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager and this girlfriend I had give me a dressing down because I did something that she wouldn't do, and I was mean to someone, and I was lucky to be with her. And I don't know, that's just an unpleasant way to sort of view the world, you know, and to tell people you're lucky. You know, I very much now in my old age appreciative of the way in which something makes me feel. I go on gut feeling. And when I met you guys, I had a good feeling. I correspond with some people and I go, I'm out. Nope. And then sometimes I'll do a gig and I'll go to my wife, I'll go, I think this guy's going to be a bit funny. And I'll go to the show and then this guy will like turn up. You know, he'll be the promoter or whatever, or the owner. And he'll be sort of like looking at you, but he's got one eye looking somewhere else. And he's like all very shifty. And then he'll be like really cagey. And then he'll start messing around and pushing buttons that interfere with your sound check. And then at the end of the evening, you'll have a really disjointed conversation about, as is what happened to me recently, politics. And you go, all right, well, you're not a bad guy, but I was right. The way in which you correspond with people and the way in which you are in person, you know, they are linked, and I can tell that, and I become more perceptive. But if I feel that there's something malicious behind someone's intent through their tone alone, then I will walk away from that, because no one should be exposed to that.
And I think it's important. It's an important point, because there are some people, especially when they come to Hollywood and they want to make it big, they find themselves in compromising situations that they may not feel right about, but they're thinking, oh, but is this my big break? Oh, is this going to be?
But this is what that
Yeah.
and it's the whole Me Too thing where people felt that, is this what I'm supposed to do? And I'm glad you said Hollywood in that tone, because I do the same, which is there are people who don't give a rat's ass about me when I'm, you know, 2 doors down and could have dinner with them. But the moment they see I've got a gig in some, you know, place in Hollywood, you know, Hollywood, they go, oh, I know that guy. And as you know, not everywhere in Hollywood is this. It's not the Playboy Mansion. Okay, not that that's where I aspire to be at, but it's about perceptions.
Right.
And when people talk, when I say, oh, I'm doing this in Hollywood, and they've never been, they go, oh, it's all right for some. And it's like, well, actually, it's quite a hard day's, you know, hard day's work or whatever. It's quite an unpleasant drive today because it's hot and there's traffic and blah, blah, blah. And they don't see that. They just see the name. And when people see the name, they get ideas above their station sometimes, and sometimes they feel belittled. And they go, I have to take this crap because I'm in Hollywood now and I really want that. And, you know, has the whole casting couch culture existed? Yes. Have some people gone along with it consensually, you know, to start with? Yes, they have. But there's a different type of... There is another type of victimization, which is to see someone's vulnerability. And even though you've got their consent, you in a position of more knowledge and power capitalize on that and make them feel that they owe you that much. And yes, that person consents to anything from the poor gig to sex, but it does say something of the measure of the person who will try and capitalize on someone's innocence, and I think that's another type of victimization that needs to be taken into consideration now.
Yeah, and I think the conversations we're having here are great because these things don't always get said in an open forum. You know, we may say this behind the scenes, backstage, and we kind of deal with what, you know, the business. But I think it's important to really have a sense that, you know what, you can trust your instincts about a situation. And it's like you said before, it's okay to say no. You know, it's okay to have your best interest as the priority, you know, and in the end. So, you know, I appreciate you, you know, bringing up, you know, these conversations. And, you know, we could talk about this forever, really.
Oh,
you know, so,
I mean, I said no to a show recently because it was out in the desert, and I'd been told by one of the acts, you won't get on site, and it was looking really shady, and Andrea and I, because I was on at 8 a.m, I just said, oh, we drive out into the desert, we'll sleep in the car, and you know, whatever, I'll do the show. And when I was told you won't get up that hill, and that it's unlit, and that no one's answering their phones, it stopped becoming about, you know, a show. It became about something far bigger, which was the safety of my wife and I. You know, life, and that's potentially life and death. You know, I don't want to fall down a ravine, you know, in the dark. And the organizer in question, there were just so many red flags, and I went with my gut, and I saw some things after that made me go, and you were right to do so.
Yep. And there you go.
There you go.
So, Baz, do you have another song that you could share with us? Or?
I do. I knew I wanted to do "Don't Let Me Go On" to start with, but I was like, I'm going to go along, and I'm going to feel things out, and I'm going to see how I feel, and what you guys might respond to. And we were talking about metal as much as we were talking about soul tonight. So I'd like to sing another video single of mine from my work with Magic 8 Ball, Keep Me Out the Sunlight. So
Sounds good.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's hear it.
With the monkey on my back, take me back to what's been seen on your plastic silver screen that won't do jack. And where you've been, it's a wonder that you've seen anything. In what's outside, it's no wonder that you hide, but it's not far from where you are. With your skeletons dancing in your closet tonight, the bones upon your floorboards won't you upright. Well, I don't care what goes on out of sight, just keep me out the sunlight. I will be only half of what me, I'm your enemy. You're looking right through me, and this degree of controlled insanity, my deepest sympathy. And what to do when they're coming after you every night? You'll never sleep tonight. You'll learn how me and your trusted company stabs insomniacs right there in their bags. With the skeletons dancing in your closet tonight, the bones upon your floorboards put you upright. Well, I don't care what goes on out of sight, just keep me out the sunlight. 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 Oh. Oh. Oh.
Cool, Baz. Thanks so much for stopping by. I know you're promoting some things. You're on tour. Do you have anything you want to plug while you're here? You want to tell the people what you got going on, man?
I have quite a few things I'd like to plug.
Great.
And one of those things is the fact that because I'm now standing, I have a microphone aimed at my crotch. So, what the
That's
listeners-
Francis.
is it
He
saying
always
anything?
tries it. When Francis tries to get away with something, man, you got to be careful, 'cause you never know what he's up to.
I want to know what what information. Well, I can tell you for all the listeners at home, all that I'm about to say is not coming from my vocal mic now. Well, you can find me. No. Let's keep it clean, boys. Let's keep it clean.
Not on this podcast.
Okay, you can find me on the internet at various places. You can find me on Facebook. My solo page is facebook.com/Baz Francis Music. You can find me with my band Magic 8 Ball. Facebook again, I Love Magic 8 Ball. You can also find me with my other band, Mansion Harlots, also on the old FB. I am on Twitter as Baz Francis and the number 8 afterwards. And that's the number, not the spelt number. I am on Instagram. I am on the YouTubes as I Love Magic 8 Ball again. And I'm on SoundCloud and various other places. You can catch me live all across California and indeed the world. And it's been an absolute pleasure being on Tune Up and Jam with you fine gentlemen this evening.
So you're saying you're hard to find. That's basically what you're saying.
Very
Gotta search really.
incognito.
Yeah. So we're wrapping this up. And Baz, I just wanted to say appreciate you coming on. And you have an open invitation anytime you want to come back and just, promote some future stuff or just hang out and jam.
Absolutely.
I actually, you were saying something when I was doing Keep Me Out the Sunlight, and I was just like, yeah, let's make noise. Yeah, so thank you. It really means a lot to me.
Invites there, man. Invites there.
So as usual, podcast at tuneupanjam.com to email us, and we can be found all over the internet as well. We can be found. So
Wrapping this one up.
Wrapping this up.
All right.
Later.
Bye.
All right, bye.